All right, everybody, we are back this week for UFC 312 live from Sydney, Australia. It's a rematch from UFC 297 for the middleweight championship of the world between the middleweight champion and Dricus Du Plessis taking on the former champion, standout boxer, and awkward technician in a way, in Sean Tarzan Strickland. And then in the co-main event of the evening, you have a battle for the women's strawweight championship between the reigning, defending phenom at 115 pounds in Magnum Zhang Weili, defending her strap against an undefeated phenom grappler in her own right in Tatiana Suarez. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. All right, guys, let's kick it off with the first bout up in the flyweight division. You have a battle between Hyunsung taking on Nyamjargal Tumendemberel. And in this fight, I'm going to keep it 100 with you guys. I watched tape on both of these guys, and I think the better technician overall is Park. I think he moves a little bit better. He's a little bit better in and out. But I honestly feel like the aggression and the forward pressure and the pace of Nyamjargal is really what makes the difference here. I feel like Nyamjargal fights like he wants to kill you, whereas I think Hyunsung Park more fights that he just wants to win. Like, obviously, he has good grappling. I believe him to be the better grappler. He's probably the better technical striker, but I just feel like Nyamjargal is going to be able to cause car crashes in between certain exchanges. And I really think that's what's going to make the difference here. I'm like I said, I'm not saying that Park doesn't have a chance, because I just explained a few of the reasons why he can definitely win this fight. He's cleaner. He's sharper. He's got good back control. He's able to win some exchanges on the ground and take your back and look for submissions. And we did see that, Tumendemberel had some issues with his grappling against Carlos Hernandez. But he also hurt Carlos Hernandez and lost that fight via a split decision. Carlos Hernandez is a guy who's counted out in almost every single one of his fights, but he always kind of outperforms what people expect from him. He's not an easy fight for anybody. Just look at Ray Saruya. Like, Saruya won the fight, but the scrambles, the exchanges, the reversals, I don't think Hyunsung Park's grappling is near that level, and I don't think he has near the technical ability on the feet to really cause a ton of issues for a guy like Tumendemberel. I think Tumendemberel has a lot of power. I think he, like I said, likes to cause car crashes, and I think he's going to be able to defend some of the grappling. Obviously, what you're worried about if you're on the side of the underdog in Tumendemberel is the fact that he can be taken down and he can be controlled. But again, based off what I've mentioned, I don't think Hyunsung Park has the grappling level of a Carlos Hernandez. Do I think he can find ways to potentially set up submissions? Yes. Do I think he can find a way to take the back and maybe win some minutes on the clock by putting in that body triangle and landing some pitter-pat shots? Yes, I do. But I think Hyunsung Park is going to run into a big shot, and I'm actually going to go with the underdog for the first fight up with Nyamjargal. I'm going to go with Nyamjargal Tumendemberel. Give me the art of knockout to win this fight by knockout. I'm going to go with Tumendemberel second round KO against Hyunsung Park. I really think that he's going to just be able to find one of those big shots and hurt him. And even if the fight goes to a decision, I think the more damaging moments, the bigger moments, the fighter who's going to be causing those bigger wowing effects for the judges is going to be a guy like Tumendemberel. And like I said, I think he's live for a KO. That's what I'm going to go with. Give me the art of knockout, Nyamjargal Tumendemberel, to get a second round KO over Hyunsung Park. Up next, you got a battle in the lightweight division between a Contender Series alum in Quillan Salkilld taking on Anshul Jubli. Now, everybody's going to remember Jubli for getting knocked out by Mike Breeden in the third round after Breeden was pretty much getting picked apart, but he was landing some good boxing combinations as well, and he just got in the head of Anshul Jubli, pushed him back, didn't allow Jubli to control the pace, and ended up knocking him out in the third round, barking at him, putting his hands down, walking him down. Just kind of made Anshul Jubli his punk bitch. I mean, he kind of made him look like a punk bitch, like just in general, the way that fight played out. he broke him mentally, broke him physically, and then landed that little shifting right hand over the top and put him down. I think in this fight, it's going to be more of a point fighting style. Jubli has decent jabs, a solid 1-2. He moves well. Very good front stabbing, like stabbing front kick or teep kick to the body. I think that that's something he's going to be looking to use against a tall, long guy. But you don't really want to have Salkilld at that kicking range because he can dictate that pace. He can dictate it. He can move around. He can land leg kicks of his own. He can be hit. You know, even on the Contender Series, he got hit with some big shots from Gage Young and pushed up against the cage. But I think Quillan Salkilld is a very solid technician. He's very good on the feet. He knows how to win grappling exchanges. He knows how to get reversals in the grappling exchanges. He can take your back. He can lock in a body triangle. He can tie up your legs and take you down up against the cage. I mean, he's just a very well-rounded guy, and I honestly think he's better everywhere than Anshul Jubli. I think the biggest difference probably would be the power of Jubli. I think maybe he has more one-hitter quitter knockout ability, and we have seen, you know, Salkilld get hit with some big shots. But honestly, in this fight, I think it's going to be kind of a paint by numbers, a murder via 1,000 cuts, death via 1,000 cuts, where, you know, Jubli's going to have some good exchanges. The first round's probably going to be close, but when we get into that second round, when we get into that third round, I think that the pace of Salkilld, the angles, the little shifts he makes with his footwork, the 1-2s, the long front kicks to the body that he can also use, the good low kicks, good inside, outside low kicks, pushing Jubli up against the cage, taking him down, you know, landing ground and pound when he probably wins superior positioning in those the grappling scrambles. I just think Salkilld is the much more polished fighter. And aside from a big shot that Jubli can land, I mean, like I said, he could potentially clip Salkilld. I think Salkilld is going to break him down, man. Like, honestly, that's what I see. Like I said, death via 1,000 cuts, death via volume, death via accumulation, call it what you want. He's going to start to pick him apart. He's going to start to land some combos. I think Jubli's going to get discouraged and maybe kind of not want to push forward and just get backed up a little bit, kind of like the Mike Breeden fight. I think Salkild's going to be using his jab, using the 1-2, cutting that little angle off to his right and landing that right hand over the top. Good little stabbing front kick, that switch kick to the body. And I think he's going to start to rip that body, start to come back up top, and I think he's going to break him. I'm going to go with a third round TKO for Quillan Salkilld over Anshul Jubli. I think he's going to break this guy. We've seen him break before. If you break once, you can break again. And I think Salkilld is cleaner, sharper, more technical. He's got a more well-rounded game. He's got good grappling to fall back on if his striking isn't going his way. He's very long, so he can lock up that body triangle, put in the limbs to control his opponent. And yeah, I like Salkilld here. I'm going to go with a third round TKO for Quillan Salkilld. I talked about this guy on the Contender Series. I'm talking about him after. I think this is a kid you got to keep your eyes on. And yeah, I'm going to take the big favorite. I would probably look to play 2-3 KO if I'm going to play anything, or Salkilld round 2, round 3. But yeah, I think he finds a finish late. So give me third round TKO for the favorite in Quillan Salkilld. All right, next up is a very interesting fight in the welterweight division. You have a battle between a fighter coming off of the Contender Series in Jonathan Micallef taking on Kevin Jousset. Now, the last time we saw Jousset inside the octagon, he got TKO'd, standing TKO'd by Brian Battle. I believe that was in the second round of their fight. And early on, Jousset was cracking him. Jousset very heavy on the jab, using his long reach, jab, left hook, 1-2 down the middle, trying to keep his opponent away from him. And let me just tell you guys this. If this fight stays primarily in the striking ranges, I do think Micallef is going to be in for a rough night. If it's a 15-minute kickboxing match, I think Jousset probably could find a late finish or would win by a decision. And a lot of people are going to sit here and they're going to talk about his judo black belt. He has throws, he has grappling in his own right, he has submissions. And on the Contender Series, we did see Muhammad Haddo almost catch that little 10-finger guillotine or that ninja choke against Micallef. But Micallef was able to get out, shuck him past him, and use that to kind of swing himself into taking the back and then swing himself into taking a triangle. This guy's jiu-jitsu is legit. His takedowns, his grappling, his submissions. If he's on top of Kevin Jousset, it's a problem for Jousset. If he is on the bottom against Jousset, Jousset is in a lot of trouble. I mean, this guy threw up a triangle that was very, very slickly set up, cut the angle perfectly, and, you know, kind of choked his opponent unconscious before the triangle was even fully locked in. Once he fully got it, I mean, he was pretty much already gone at that point. I do think that Micallef has the better grappling here, and on the ground, I think he will kind of expose Kevin Jousset. I think Jousset can obviously stuff the takedowns or use the traditional takedowns of Micallef to kind of, you know, use the over-under throw or the hip toss and use it to get on top, you know, Oshigari and things like that. You know, stuffing the takedown using the whizzer and hitting a little whizzer throw. I expect to probably see that at a certain point, maybe when Micallef tries to work his way back up. He can leave his neck there to get caught in a guillotine from Kevin Jousset, because Jousset does have submissions on his record. But I do think Micallef, you know, can compete on the feet. Even though he's known primarily as a grappler and a jiu-jitsu artist, he still has decent enough striking where I think he's going to force Jousset to respect him a little bit. Maybe Jousset's winning early using the jab, using the check hook, using the 1-2, and Micallef lands an overhand to shoot a takedown, lands a left hook, lands a 1-2 down the middle. Like, I think the striking is going to be competitive. And I believe the fighter who is much more seasoned on the ground to be Micallef. I think he's got much better grappling. I think he's going to be hunting for submissions. And, you know, if you look at that Contender Series fight, when he locked up that triangle, it was fast. There was no wasted movement. There was no extra time. Like, he jumped right from that little whizzer to the triangle choke, and that was it. It was on. He cut the angle, and, you know, he was in the choke for a little while. But to be honest with you, I mean, I don't think Jousset would last very long on the mat against Jonathan Micallef. I don't think he lasts long on the top because I think he could get caught in an armbar or caught in a triangle. But if Micallef's on the top, he's going to be passing. He's going to be getting to mount. He's going to look for an arm triangle. He's going to look for a rear naked choke. And, I mean, coming down to the prediction, I think Jousset is going to get submitted here. I think the grappling is just too high level from Micallef. And obviously, we've seen more from Jousset inside the UFC, but he hasn't beaten really high-level competition. And I'm not saying Micallef has either, but I think that makes this fight closer than what people are thinking. I think they might be thinking a little bit too highly of Jousset and not giving Micallef the respect he deserves for how high-level his jiu-jitsu and submission game really is. And he's not like a guard puller or anything like that. He has wrestling on top of it with trips and takedowns and looking for subs. So I'm going to go with the underdog in Jonathan Micallef. I want to say Micallef, but that's obviously not it. I'm going to go with Jonathan Micallef to get a submission against Kevin Jousset. I'm going to go with a second round rear naked choke submission. I think it's either going to be an arm triangle or a rear naked choke. I think he catches the neck of Jousset and submits him. And I do think that he's going to win here as a big underdog. I don't know too much about Micallef, but from what I've seen on tape, number one, the jiu-jitsu serious, the grappling is serious, but he's not a novice on the feet, and that's what really makes the difference here for me. If he didn't know really anything about striking, if he got clipped left and right and fell into takedowns, I would probably have a different outlook, but he can strike, he can move pretty well, and he can use his striking to get into those takedowns. So I think Micallef's going to do that, find a way to take the neck and get a submission. So give me Jonathan Micallef to defeat Kevin Jousset via second round rear naked choke submission. Up next, we've got a battle in the lightweight division between another guy coming off the Contender Series in Cody Steele taking on Rongzhu. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this fight, to be honest, and it's mainly because I think this is a showcase spot for Cody Steele. Rongzhu, decent striking, okay takedown defense, but I kind of think he's outmatched in every area. I think Cody Steele will put too much pressure on Rongzhu on the feet. I think he will get on the inside. I think he'll rip shots to the body. I think he'll come over the top. And I think he's going to be the better grappler. I mean, Cody Steele is known as a grappler. He's known for having really solid wrestling in jiu-jitsu, but also being able to hang on the feet. On the Contender Series, I bet Cody Steele to win by KO. I think I got that at plus 430. And he dropped his opponent, who was a pretty solid fighter in his own right, with a body shot and put him down. Ripped those body shots, got on the front foot, pushed his opponent back. Really solid boxing technique from Cody Steele. not being known primarily as a striker, but he's a mixed martial artist. I believe Cody Steele to be, to be capable of winning in every area of the game. I think he can outstrike some fighters. He's got good wrestling. He can submit you. He can land ground and pound. And like I said, he's comfortable on the feet. I think Rongzhu is going to be longer. He's going to want to use his range, use his reach, use those front snap kicks and teep kicks to the body. Jab the body, come back up top with the right hand. Jab the body, left hook, right hand. 3-2. Use long combinations. Keep Cody Steele away from you. Minimize the kicking game unless it's those little front kicks up the middle or little snapping kicks to the leg, like inside-outside low kicks or maybe a calf kick to cut those angles. But I think Cody Steele's going to run through Rongzhu. I like him here. I think that, I don't know if he's going to be like a top contender. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this guy's going to be a champion and everything like that. But I think the UFC knows what they're doing here with this fight. I think it's basically a setup fight for Cody Steele to look really good in his UFC debut. And we know that those always, don't work out. Look at the fight between Christian Rodriguez and Raul Rosas Jr. Even though it wasn't his debut, didn't work out how they hoped. Look at the fight with Austin Bashi and Christian Rodriguez. There's a reason we call him the prospect killer. And Rongzhu does have solid boxing, decent enough striking. He might be able to hurt Cody Steele at a certain point, but I don't think that happens. I think Cody Steele comes in, gets a couple takedowns. Maybe he gets a submission, but I think he wins by knockout. I like Cody Steele by a second round KO. I think he's going to make it competitive in the first round, but start to close the distance, start to close off the range, using his jabs, using his 1-2, starting to rip to the body, come back up top with hooks to the head, and I think he lands that right hand right on the chin of Rongzhu and puts him on the wrong end of a knockout. So give me Cody Steele to win this fight via second round KO over Rongzhu. Up next, we have a battle in the bantamweight division with the long-awaited debut of Aleksandre Topuria, the brother of Ilia Topuria, taking on a short notice replacement, replacing, what's the guy's name from the Contender Series? Cody Haddon. Replacing Cody Haddon with Colby Thickness fighting out of City Kickboxing. I think he might actually come from the other gym that Volkanovski trains out of, actually. Not City Kickboxing, but the other gym. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'm sure you'll mention it in the comments below. But, yeah, let me talk a little bit about Cole. So, this guy actually watched a very early video on my podcast from 2020 where I broke down Aleksandre Volkanovski, who's obviously a teammate of his. And he was one of the first guys to reach out to me, say, hey, I love your breakdowns. This is great. I believe he actually sent it to Aleksandre Volkanovski, obviously. Don't take me out in the comments for what I just said, but he sent it to his teammate. And, that means a lot to me. So I do want Colby to win. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I want Colby to win, guys. I have a little bit of bias in me. But there's a difference between want and what you think is going to happen. And I'm going to be honest. I like the heart of Colby Thickness. Man, I like the fact that even when he gets hurt, he finds a way to come back. And I think if this is a type of fight where Topuria hurts him early and he can't get him out of there, that midpoint of the second round into the third round, we might see Colby Thickness turn the pressure on and maybe get a late finish because, Aleksandre Topuria has lost before. But watching the tape, this guy reminds me a lot of Ilia. He reminds me a lot of Ilia. Very, very light on the feet, using the lead hand to measure and kind of hypnotize the opponent. 1-2 down the middle, good jab, solid movement, good wrestling, solid ground and pound. I mean, this guy looks like the whole package. We don't know because we haven't seen him in the UFC. And he has lost before. But I think Colby has a shot to pull this out late. If he can survive that early storm and wear down Aleksandre Topuria, rip to the body, throw those front kicks, land knees in the clinch, land uppercuts, I think he can win. But when it comes down to the pick, I'm going to pick Aleksandre Topuria. It pains me to say it, because I want Colby to win. Like I said, I'm rooting for him. I want him to pull off this upset because nobody's expecting him to win. And like I said, I got a soft spot for him. He supported my podcast. He reached out to me. He responded back and forth in the DMs. And this was years ago. But, you know, I'm happy that he's getting his shot. And I didn't forget that he did support me. But the pick, I have to go with Aleksandre Topuria. I've seen this guy get hurt before. And that's really what's pushing me towards the Topuria side. I've seen him get dropped. I've seen him get hurt to the body. I've seen him get rocked, but like I said, he finds a way to come back. He's got slick jiu-jitsu. He's decent on the feet, but the real bread and butter of his game is, you know, finding a way to take the back, putting those hooks in, getting to that body triangle, looking to set up submissions and control his opponent, heavy on the pressure, front foot, and if he can survive the first round and a half, this might be Colby Thickness's fight to win. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you like I already talked about in the breakdown. But I think the technical skill, the well-rounded game, and the power of Topuria is going to be too much. So give me Aleksandre Topuria, second round TKO. It hurts me to say it. I'm rooting for Colby, but I got to go with Aleksandre in this fight. All right, the next fight up is in the women's flyweight division. We have the return of Wang Cong taking on a big underdog in the Fighting Nerds, Bruna, Brasil. You know, Wang Cong was a huge favorite in her last fight against Gabriela Fernandez. I played her by knockout. I thought for sure she was going to knock her out, and she didn't. She got taken down, ground and pounded, and choked out. And Fernandez is a solid fighter. She proved me wrong before in fighting the Contender Series fighter in Carly Judas, and she did it again against Wang Cong, this time a much bigger underdog. But realistically, I think Wang Cong obviously has more power than Bruna Brasil in this fight. But I think the more well-rounded fighter, if I'm being honest, is Bruna Brasil. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but again, at the same time, we've seen Bruna Brasil get knocked out. We've seen her get put down. We saw her get knocked out by the power puncher Indonesia Gomes. And we've seen her get rocked and hurt in multiple fights. I picked her as a big underdog against Molly McCann. She looked very good. She clearly won the fight. There was a few bad spots she could have been in, but I think the key to this fight for Brasil is staying at kicking range against Wang Cong, getting her up against the cage, and then using her wrestling. I think you can take this girl down. I think you can ground and pound her. I think you can beat her up. I think you can submit her. I think the grappling on Brasil's side is much higher level than Wang Cong. Now, if you get into a straight boxing match, you're going to lose more than likely. If you get into a straight kickboxing match, for the most part, you're giving her more of a chance to knock you out. That's what Wang Cong wants to do. She wants to be on the feet. She wants to stay at range, and she wants to beat you up, pick you apart. I mean, she has a one-punch KO in women's MMA. That's serious. That is serious. But I like the movement. I like the in-and-out movement. I like the kicking game of Bruna Brasil. I like her grappling, even though we don't see much of it. I think she's going to be the much better grappler in this fight. We saw her use it against Molly McCann. We saw her take the back. We saw her get some takedowns. We saw her almost lock up a rear naked choke. And she was landing good front kicks to the body, good shots to the body with her hands as well. And she had good footwork, good movement, good lateral motion. And I think if she fights the right game plan, she can win. And coming out of the Fighting Nerds, I think they're going to have the right game plan. And I think we're going to see Brasil stay on the outside, use those long, rangy kicks. And when Wang Cong tries to close the distance, I think we're going to get some body locks, some takedowns. And I think Brasil's going to take her down. I think she's going to work from the top. And I think we're going to get a Bruna Brasil submission. You heard it here first. I'm going big underdog, plus 350. Give me Bruna Brasil to win this fight by second round rear naked choke submission. Now, I know she got submitted in her last fight against Fernandez, but she got rocked, she got hurt. I could see a similar situation where Brasil rocks her, takes her neck, and chokes her out. I'm being 100% honest with you. And I think Wang Cong suffered from that situation of not fighting the highest level competition, killing a can in her UFC debut, and then kind of getting overblown. Don't get me wrong, I think she's good. I think she has good striking. I think that, like I said, if it's a mainly kickboxing match, I think Brasil probably gets wrecked. But I think Brasil can compete in certain areas, and if she fights at the correct range and uses her wrestling and grappling on top of it, where I believe her to be the much better grappler in this fight, I think she can win. So give me the underdog. Give me the plus 350 Bruna Brasil to win this fight via second round rear naked choke submission. She might get it done in the first. I think she takes her down, beats her up, and takes a sub and wins as a big underdog. Bruna, Brasil, second round rear naked choke submission. All right, this next fight up is in the lightweight division between Tom Nolan taking on Vyacheslav Borshchev. Slava Claus. I think this is a tough one to call, man. I think both of these guys are glass cannons. They're very good at being a hammer, not very good at being a nail. Nolan, solid striking, very solid from that southpaw stance, can land that good kicks to the body, good front kicks, controlling the range. Had a knockout on the Contender Series against Bogdan Grad. We saw what Grad just did to Lucas Alexander. Then he comes in, gets knocked out by Nicholas Mota, and goes life and death with Alex Reyes. And I think a lot of people kind of soured on him at that point, myself included. I understand why Nolan is a underdog here. I think there's a few people that don't understand it, but at the same time, you can't really be confident in putting Borshchev or Nolan as a favorite. But I do think Borshchev looked really good in a fight I picked against him against Yamez Yonta. And we saw him go to the distance with Mauricio Hufi, where a lot of people expected him to get KO'd. So we know that, Yontop is a very tough guy. He's a tough fighter. He's going to come forward. He's going to look to box, look to get in your face, and look to make it a fight. And Borshchev kind of outclassed him. There was a certain point where maybe it was a little close. I think it was a split decision because Borshchev got tired towards the end of the fight and Yontop was able to come on in that third round. In this fight, I think it's not going to be much grappling. It's going to mainly be a striking match. Seeing Borshchev get dropped by Chase Hooper, who's not really known as a striker, does worry me against a sniper like Nolan. But I also think this is kind of a case of whoever lands first is going to win. And like I said, I can understand people playing the underdog in Nolan. He's long, he's rangy, he uses his length good, solid counter striking, solid striking off the back foot, mixes up his combinations well. But again, like I said, looks very good when he's in control. When he's not in control, things kind of fall off the wheels, fall off the wayside. And with Borshchev, I think it's the same thing, but I think Borshchev is more accustomed to getting hurt and coming back and getting into a fight. Again, I think that Chase Hooper fight where he got dropped and should have got TKO'd, but ended up getting caught in that Darce choke and getting submitted. That should have been a TKO for Chase Hooper. I don't know why the ref let it go as long as it did. But at the end of the day, I got to go with Slava Claus here. And I'm not supremely confident in it, but I think he has more left in the tank. I think he can come back from adversity better than a guy like Tom Nolan can. And mainly because we've seen Borshchev come back from adversity, we haven't really seen Nolan come back from much adversity. And I think Nolan could snipe him in the first round and knock him out. But I'm going to say that this fight goes a little bit longer. And I think Borshchev gets into his rhythm, starts ripping those hooks to the body, big uppercuts, big hooks. And I think he cracks the chin of Tom Nolan and ends up knocking him out in the second round. I'm going to go with Vyacheslav Borshchev. I'm going to go with Slava Claus second round knockout over Tom Nolan. Like I said, I think the best way to play this fight, honestly, is fight ends by KO. If you want to get crazy, maybe you look at Nolan's submission, because we know that you can submit a guy like Borshchev, and I believe he did go for a sub against Alex Reyes, but it didn't really work out. Almost got put in a submission by the Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, but he was able to get out. But I could see Nolan sniping Borshchev and knocking him out. But I think the cleaner striker, I think the fighter who's more accustomed to getting into a fight, who's more accustomed to coming back from adversity, is who's going to win. So give me Slava Claus, Vyacheslav Borshchev, to win this fight via second round knockout and put Tom Nolan out cold. Up next, you have another banger in the featherweight division between Jack Farr Jenkins taking on Gabriel Santos. 13-3 for Jack Jenkins, 11-2 for Santos, but coming in his UFC debut, losing a split decision to Lerone Murphy, where he almost submitted him a handful of times. Breaking down this fight, this should be a pick'em. There's no reason why Jack Jenkins was a 2-1 underdog. I believe now he's plus 195, so I think some people are starting to catch on, but I believe Jack Jenkins to be the much better striker, but I think Gabriel Santos is the much better grappler, but I think he wants to stay on the feet for a little bit too long for my liking against a guy with the striking and the technique of Jack Jenkins. Now, if you look at Santos in his last fight against Rongzhu, we picked against Santos. Rongzhu was my underdog. Now, thinking about it, it wasn't a great pick, but there was situations in that fight where Rongzhu was cracking Santos, and Zhu's not really known as a striker. He's mainly a grappler, mainly a jiu-jitsu artist. But he was landing some big shots, and the defense of Santos did not look that great. Santos is basically a shuto box style fighter on the feet. Moving in and out, good low kicks, good kicks to the body, solid boxing, puts his combinations together well. And the technical striking on the feet from Santos looks good. He's not a bad striker, but he's not great defensively. And I think with the same token, Jack Jenkins is much more technical on the feet, much sharper on the feet, but also not the best defensively when the fight hits the ground. I think that the smartest idea for Santos would be to use his striking to draw out a brawl, and then as Jenkins comes forward, you counter takedown, counter wrestle. So you start to get into a brawl, you get Jenkins to get on that front foot. As he gets on the front foot, you change levels, get the takedown, and work from the top position. I think Santos could probably control Jenkins for much of the round if he gets a takedown, either from taking the back and putting in that body triangle, hunting submissions, or just staying on top. I think it's going to be very hard for Jenkins to get up. And we could see a situation where on the feet, Jenkins is kind of piecing him up, but then he gets taken down and gets controlled. Because we kind of saw that in the Herbert Burns fight. On the feet, Jenkins was ripping him apart. But the once, Herbert Burns got those takedowns, it was very hard for Jenkins to do much of anything on the ground. But I think Santos has that thought in his head where he wants to kind of brawl with most of his opponents. And I think that's a terrible idea against Jack Jenkins. Now, takedowns, rinse and repeat for 3 rounds, maybe get a late submission or win a clear decision. I think Santos is submission or decision. And I think Jenkins is kind of knockout or bust. Because I don't necessarily see him winning a decision based on the fact that it's probably going to be a lot of grappling control if the fight goes 15 minutes. We're probably going to see Santos use those takedowns, get to the top position, take the back of Jenkins, soften him up, maybe doesn't get the sub, but does enough to keep the positions and wins a decision. I think he will be competitive on the feet. I think Santos' striking is nice. It's crisp, it's clean, but it's nowhere near the level of a Jenkins. And I saw in Santos' fight against Rongzhu, who's not known as a striker, where he got clipped. His defense is not really there. You can clip him over the shoulder. He kind of frames and circles away, and that leaves him open for combinations, long combinations and big shots. We saw a similar situation where he was basically piecing up David Onama, winning the entire fight, and then one little uppercut from inside changed everything, and he got knocked out cold. I think this is a fight where Gabriel Santos is going to be winning until he's not. And I'm going to go with Jack Jenkins. I think he knocks Gabriel Santos out. I do not like what I've seen from Santos with the striking defense enough to pick him, especially as a big favorite, over Jack Jenkins. I think this fight is going to be close. I think Santos has gotten some pretty tough matchups in his UFC career. And, people are going to sour on him. I don't think you should. Even if he loses this fight, he might get cut, but I think Santos has a lot to offer the UFC. I think he has a lot to offer this division, but I think Jack Jenkins is just a tough matchup for him because I don't see him resorting to the grappling as his main form of success. I think he's going to want to strike. I think he's going to want to mix it up, and I think that wanting to play on the feet with Jack Jenkins is going to leave him open to get countered and get knocked out. So I'm going to go with Jack Jenkins to win this fight via second round knockout. I think he clips Santos. He's got clean, crisp combinations, punctuating his boxing with his kickboxing, solid work on the inside with uppercuts and hooks. And we did see Onama catch Santos with that little uppercut on the inside. So, in close range, he also doesn't have the best defense, does Santos. So I think Jenkins finds that knockout, and I think he puts away Gabriel Santos. So give me the plus 200, plus 195 underdog in Jack Bar Jenkins to win this fight via second round knockout in Australia. All right, next fight up is in the light heavyweight division. You got a battle between Jimmy the Brute Crute taking on Rodolfo Bellato. 12-2 for Bellato, 12-4 for Jimmy Crute. I think this fight, again, is kind of a hard fight to call because both of these guys are kind of glass cannons. You know, we haven't seen Bellato get knocked out in the UFC, but we saw him get rocked bad against Ihor Potieria and come back. We've seen that he has pretty solid jiu-jitsu, good takedowns, solid work off of his back. He will look for subs. He will look to get back up to his feet. And he has good defense from strikes on his back, you know, throwing big shots. You can slip, move, and work your way back up. I think that the size of Bellato kind of breaks opponents the longer that the fights go. Like, he doesn't stop moving forward. He'll always try to be on the pressure. He'll always try to put you on that back foot. And Jimmy Crute is a guy that we've seen come back from adversity, but we've also seen him get knocked out cold, but he got knocked out by the former light heavyweight champion in Jamal Hill. And then he got back and forth war with Alonzo Menefield where it went to a draw the first time around. They fought again, and Menefield clearly won that fight by decision. But he hurt Jimmy Crute multiple times, and Crute still came forward. He looked for takedowns. He was willing to throw his own hands and throw his boxing combinations. You know, Crute is not a guy who's going to quit on himself, but we have seen him kind of break and slow down later in fights. But I think Bellato, just in the same, could be clipped, could be hurt, and maybe Crute could hurt him and then submit him. I think Jimmy Crute is going to be the better grappler here in terms of MMA grappling. Maybe all-around grappling, Bellato has the better ground game, better top control, better submissions. But I think when it comes to MMA grappling, we might see Jimmy Crute rock Rodolfo Bellato, and then as he goes to get back up to his feet, he locks up that choke and submits him. So I think when it comes down to it, you really have to look at this fight of who's going to fall apart first. And it's very hard to predict. Bellato, heavy on the pressure, decent boxing, puts his combinations together, pushes you up against the cage, will rip the body on the inside, rip the uppercuts, rip the hooks. He's very good on the inside, rip, come up the middle, come around the side. But he also gets hit and gets rocked. Jimmy Crute, solid boxing, good jab. Good 1-2, but he can be hurt as well. He can be clipped. He can be rocked. And, you know, both of these guys, they can come back, but I think they're also both capable of being finished. I think this honestly is a coin flip, and I think the odds kind of reflect that. Bellato's like minus 190, Jimmy Crute plus 140. I think it makes sense because the momentum is on the side of Bellato. I picked Bellato to win against Ihor Potieria, and yeah, he got it done, but I was clenching my cheeks the entire time because he got rocked, he got wobbled, he got put down. I mean, that fight arguably could have been stopped and could have been a TKO for Potieria, but it went on longer. Bellato survived and came back to just push that pace, and I think Bellato has a lot of dog in him. He has a lot of heart. Jimmy Crute, again, they're fighting in New Zealand, Australia. Where is this at? I think it's Australia, maybe not. Australia, yeah. The Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia. So I think there's going to be a lot of people who are rooting for Jimmy Crute, and I think Bellato's kind of coming into enemy territory that might push Jimmy Crute to do more. That might push Jimmy Crute to have a standout performance. I'm going to go with... this fight is close. A lot of these fights are really tough to predict this week. A lot of big underdogs I think can win. I don't want to pick too many underdogs. Crute's fought the better competition, but he's also had a lot of losses and, you know, contemplated retirement. Bellato's coming in. He's hungry. I'm going to say Jimmy Crute gets a club and sub. Maybe it's the wrong decision, because Bellato can win this. But I'm going to say Crute rocks Rodolfo Bellato, drops him, and gets a guillotine choke submission. Give me Jimmy the Brute Crute to get back in the win column and get the job done via a first round guillotine choke submission. I think he rocks Bellato in an exchange. Bellato shoots, Crute locks up the neck and subs him. Give me a club and sub. First round guillotine choke submission for Jimmy the Brute Crute to come back with a vengeance. Up next, we've got a fight in the welterweight division between Jake the Celtic Kid Matthews taking on Francisco Prado. This is a great fight, one that I think is getting swept under the rug a little bit because not a lot of people know how good Jake Matthews is, and not a lot of people know how good and talented Francisco Prado is. Prado's moving up from 55 to 170, but if you see pictures of him recently, man, I mean, this dude is cut up, he's shredded, he's jacked, and I do think there's going to be a strength and power advantage on the side of Jake Matthews. I mean, you can go back and you can look at the Matthews Semmelsberger fight, and you can go back and you can look at the Andre Fialho fight. Now, Matthews probably had the best performance of his career against Andre Fialho. However, if you look at Fialho's career overall, it hasn't been that great. You know, he's gotten finished a bunch of times. He has a couple knockouts, but usually if you can put him on the back foot and start to throw against him, he will tend to break, and you probably will knock him out. But one of the first fighters we ever saw do that, at least in the UFC, was Jake Matthews, before the Joaquin Buckley head kick and before a couple of other different knockouts that he had, even outside of the UFC. Now again, Semmelsberger's a guy who has one-punch knockout power, but that's pretty much all he has. Not a lot of wrestling, not a lot of grappling, not a well-rounded MMA fighter, but he was able to drop Jake Matthews in every single round, but still probably should have lost the decision, but all the big moments in those rounds came from Semmelsberger, even though Matthews was piecing him up, using his jab, using his check hook, using the 1-2 and the 1-3-2 and the 3-2 to kind of just outbox and pick apart Semmelsberger before the big bomb landed on his chin. Now, Prado's a guy who I don't necessarily think has the best knockout power, and like I said, I think he is at a power disadvantage against a guy like Matthews, but the one thing I like about a guy like Prado is no matter how bad he's getting beat up, no matter how bad he gets cut up, no matter how many times, you know, he's bleeding, he's cut, it doesn't matter. He's still going to get on that front foot, he's still going to pressure you, and he's going to get into a fight. He doesn't mind getting into a fight. Now, on one hand, that leaves you open for a sharp counter striker, a sharp, clean striker like a Jake Matthews. And in moving up to welterweight, it's going to be a different power than he felt at 155. Matthews is a big 170er. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's built, he's jacked, he's a big dude. And I think he's going to have the biggest advantage in using his wrestling and grappling. But I also feel like the youth is on the side of Prado. I think the hunger is on the side of Francisco Prado. Not that I don't think Matthews wants it anymore, but I think Prado's coming into this fight to kill. I played Prado as an underdog against the Zaitar. I believe I played him by KO, and we know that Otman Zaitar, he's been knocked out a bunch of times. He just got knocked out against Michael Johnson, and that was a fight where it was kill or be killed. You know, whoever landed first could have gotten that finish. In this fight, I think Matthews is going to look good, but I think Prado is going to slowly start to break him down. I think he's going to survive. I don't think Matthews is going to finish him. I think even if he gets takedowns, I don't think Matthews is going to submit Prado, but I wouldn't be surprised if Matthews found a way to take the back and maybe lock up a rear naked choke. But I do like Francisco Prado here, especially as an underdog. I was on him against Zell Huber. He lost that fight, but he made it competitive. You know, we knew that he had lost, but he was in that fight for the entire time, throwing back, coming forward, getting on that front foot. And I just don't think that a guy like Matthews is going to want to get into that style of fight where no matter what you do to a guy, he's still going to be on that front foot. He's still going to be looking to land shots, and he's still going to be looking to take you out. So I think when it really comes down to it, I have to side with Francisco Prado. I think he's hungrier, and I know that Matthews has more UFC experience, but a lot of his UFC experience, at least as of late, hasn't been that great. And even in the fight against Phil Rowe, like, Matthews looked good, but there were points and positions where Phil Rowe could have won that fight. He just didn't really have the grappling chops to find his path to victory. And in this one, I think Francisco Prado can land bigger shots. I think he can out-volume Matthews at certain points, and I think he can just have the bigger moments of the fight, potentially getting a finish. If it goes to the ground, I think Prado can survive and work his way back up, and I think he's going to be the guy pushing the pace in the second and the third round. So I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going to go with Francisco Prado. I like this kid. I've liked him for a while. You know, I've picked him in all of his UFC fights, and I'm going to continue the trend here, because he was pretty close to winning that Zellhuber fight. It wasn't amazing. He didn't look like a world beater, but he showed out and he fought his ass off. So I like that from a guy, and I know Prado's going to fight tooth and nail to try to get this win. So give me Francisco Prado to beat Jake Matthews. I'm going to go with a 29-28 unanimous decision. I think he wins on the scorecards. I know Matthews is from, I believe he's from New Zealand or somewhere around that area. I could be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I know he's Irish, but I think he's from New Zealand or something like that, or Australia. So they're going to be, on the hometown side, but I think Prado's going to get it done. So 29-28, we'll go split decision for Francisco Prado. I like the dog here. And now we're at the co-main event of the evening for the Women's Strawweight Championship between the champion in Zhang Weili, 25-3 as a professional mixed martial artist, taking on who many people believe to be the female Khabib, undefeated at 11-0. A fighter we haven't seen much of in the UFC in recent years due to multiple health issues and other things along the way, injuries, health issues, in Tatiana Suarez. Like I said, the female Khabib. So I was very surprised to look at the odds and see that Zhang Weili is basically an underdog as the champion. And I was very surprised because in every one of her fights, she's always minus 500, minus 600, minus 200, minus 300, around that area. But in this fight, she's pretty much a pick'em, but based on the lines, she is the underdog. And I went and I watched the tape. And I kind of understand why, because of the heavy wrestling, the forward pressure, the constant threat of submissions, always attacking from that front headlock, looking to take your back and set up a rear naked choke. She does have a rear naked choke, a first round rear naked choke, I might add, submission victory over the former women's flyweight champion in Alexa Grasso. And that is a very big feather in her cap because Grasso is not easy to submit. And she has good jiu-jitsu in her own right. I do believe that the grappling of Tatiana Suarez is going to be a big deal against Zhang Weili. We saw Yan Xiaonan get a couple takedowns in their fight, but Yan Xiaonan also basically got choked unconscious at the end of the round and woke up after Zhang Weili let her go and they let her continue the fight. She came back later on in the fight, then got taken down, got controlled, got her back taken, etc. We saw against Amanda Lemos, Zhang Weili got caught in that ninja choke, the submission that I was expectant to see from Amanda Lemos because she's very good at locking that up, and she almost got it. It was very close, no matter what anybody says, and Zhang Weili was able to get on top of her and beat the living shit out of her with ground and pound. Top control, crucifix, just constantly landing big shots. Weili and Lemos, I believe they did go to a decision, but it was a pretty clear victory for Weili, even though Lemos did some good work in her own right on the feet, and like I said, almost getting that submission. We've seen Zhang Weili get taken down a bunch of times by Rose Namajunas. Very good timing, step through from orthodox to southpaw, wrap around the leg, and get that trip takedown. She's very good at that. That's one of Rose's biggest takedowns. But the writing is on the wall when she faces a dominant grappler, a grappler with the grappling at the level of a Tatiana Suarez. There's going to be some problems. I do believe that. I also think Tatiana Suarez has not fought a striker with the power of Zhang Weili. Now, you could say that, but she doesn't have a ton of knockouts, but she still hits very hard, especially for the women's division. I do believe Suarez, her striking is not terrible. It's not awful, but she is going to be at a striking disadvantage. Kind of like we talked about with Jousset and Micallef. With this fight, it's obviously at a different level, but Zhang Weili, if this is a kickboxing match, she's going to win. But everything is telling me that we're going to get a Amanda Nunes, Juliana Pena style of moment here. Now, I was expecting the odds to be very heavy on the side of the strawweight champion in Weili. And the fact that they're not, I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised. I get why, because like I said, with the grappling, the takedowns, always hunting for submissions. She got that rear naked choke against Alexa Grasso. She got that submission via guillotine choke against Montana De La Rosa. She got a guillotine choke against Jessica Andrade in her last fight before this championship fight. And I do think that if she gets on top of the champion in Weili, that Weili is going to be in a lot of trouble. If it's mainly a striking fight, I believe Zhang Weili probably picks her apart. But kind of like we talked about with Micallef, I don't think that Tatiana Suarez is a novice on the feet. I feel like her footwork is decent, her movement is decent. And you have to remember, we haven't seen her in so long. Like, yeah, she got that submission win over Jessica Andrade, but she took a lot of time off due to the health concerns that we talked about earlier. And in this fight, we don't really know what kind of Tatiana Suarez we're going to get. Her time away from the octagon, we don't know how she's going to look, even though even after a long break, she came back and looked very good against Andrade. I mean, like we said, the better striker, Weili, the better grappler, Tatiana Suarez. Whoever gets their game plan off is who's going to win. I'm going to go with Tatiana Suarez to become the new strawweight champion, and I'm going to go with her to do so via a rear naked choke submission. I think she's going to find her way to the ground, get on top of Zhang Weili, you know, pass, land some ground and pound, and I think eventually Weili's going to give up her neck. I don't think it happens early. I don't think it's a round 1 or round 2. I'm going to go with a round 3 rear naked choke submission for Tatiana Suarez in this fight. And I just really think it comes down to not only the wrestling activity, but the hunting for submissions. You know, Suarez isn't a girl who sits on top of you and just lands pitter-patter shots and tries to control you. She's waiting for you to give up one little inch of your game so she can front headlock, snap down, go from the guillotine, go to the Darce choke, go to the anaconda choke, spin and take the back, put the hooks in, go back to the guillotine. I mean, she's a very active submission threat, and that's the one thing I noticed on tape, and I don't think Weili has ever fought a girl with the submission level and the aggressiveness on the mat of a Tatiana Suarez. I could see a TKO, I really could, but I do think it ends by submission, and I'm going to go with, like I said, a third round rear naked choke and new UFC strawweight champion Tatiana Suarez. Very surprised she's basically the favorite in this one. I was not expecting that. I figured she'd be a decent-sized underdog, but I guess a lot of people are on Suarez this week, so be wary of it in terms of the betting. I honestly think the best bet for this fight is the fight to end by submission. I think it could be a case where Tatiana Suarez does what she does and does what we explained, or Tatiana gets beat up, gets tired, and she ends up giving her neck up to Zhang Weili, and maybe she ends up on the bottom, Weili gets in mount, she gives up her back, maybe she gets rear naked choked, maybe she gets caught in an arm triangle from the top as she's trying to, you know, scramble out if she ends up in a bottom position due to exhaustion or just due to a reversal. I think either girl can win by submission, and I think the fight ends by submission is plus 250 right now. I really like that. I think that's probably the way that this fight goes. So the pick, though, is going to be and new Tatiana Suarez via third round rear naked choke over Zhang Weili. All right, and now we are at the main event of the evening for the middleweight championship of the world between the champion in Dricus Du Plessis taking on Sean Strickland, the man who he took the championship from back at UFC 297. I'm going to be honest, guys. I think the fight will be close in some regards. Like, I do think that some of the striking exchanges are going to be close. I think the bigger volume or the more volume striking is going to come from Strickland. I do believe we're going to see the same Sean Strickland that we've seen in pretty much all his fights. You know, the only time Strickland really looked different was in his fight against Israel Adesanya when he won the middleweight championship. I think that he is capable of winning this fight. He's going to be the cleaner striker, but pretty much everybody is when they're fighting Du Plessis. But the thing about Du Plessis that people don't give him credit for is maybe he looks herky-jerky, maybe he looks like he's pushing his punches or exploding and leaving himself open, but he has good fight IQ, man. Du Plessis is a smart fighter. I've said this from the beginning of his career, and I'll continue to say it. Du Plessis is a lot smarter than you guys give him credit for. Go look at the finishing sequence between him and Robert Whittaker. When he hurt him, he actually kicked his leg. He threw a little leg kick to direct him into the stance switch to throw those big punches. And when he guarded up top against the fence, he ripped down to the body to sit down Whitaker after going back up top. So, I think people might discredit this guy, but he's very good. And I believe that from the last fight to this fight, I think the fighter who's gotten better, it has to be Dricus Du Plessis. It has to be the champion. How can you really sit there and tell me that Strickland has gotten better when, aside from that performance against Adesanya, when he won the title, we haven't seen much of Strickland since then. And even what we have seen, look at the Paulo Costa fight. It was like every other Strickland fight. He was the only fighter who could make a Paulo Costa fight boring. And I'm not discrediting Strickland. I gave him credit where credit is due before the Adesanya fight. I didn't pick him, but I said that he had the possibility to cause an upset, and he did it. He's a very hard fighter to read. A lot of lead hand, the Philly shell with the rear hand to catch, jabbing, wide looping hooks as the opponent circles and moves laterally. Good front stabbing teep kicks to the body as they're backing straight up. Jab, 1-2. Wide looping left hook, wide right hook as they circle left and right and move laterally. Good teeps up the middle. He's got a good game, and it's hard to penetrate. But if you can cause car crashes against a guy like Strickland, I think you can leave him open. He can be hit, and I think you have to cause car crashes. And I think the best fighter in this division to cause so-called car crashes is Du Plessis, and it is the champion. I think he's going to be the better grappler. We saw it in the first fight. He got a couple takedowns after pushing Strickland up against the cage. I expect him to continue to get takedowns in this fight. I expect him to maybe look for more takedowns in this fight, but I almost feel like Strickland is probably expecting him to look for more takedowns, and I think that's going to open up more of the striking in this match with Du Plessis. The last time they fought, they went to a decision. It was a close fight. A lot of people thought Strickland won. But if you go back and watch the fight and you see the takedowns that Du Plessis was able to implement and how the fight played out overall, I think you can understand that I think Du Plessis was the right call. Now, every fight is different. No two fights are the same. And that plays a factor in MMA from the beginning of the sport's inception. No two fights are ever going to play out exactly the same. And based on the fact that the last fight went to a decision, I think we're going to get a finish in this fight. I believe I predicted a finish in the first fight as well, but I think we're going to get a finish, and I think it's going to be and still. I believe Dricus Du Plessis is going to finish Sean Strickland, and I think it's going to be by knockout this time. He submitted Adesanya. We called that. Every fight is different. I'm not tooting my horn for that. That's just how the MMA goes. And I think that it's possible he hurts Strickland and subs him, but I think it's going to be a KO, and I think it's going to be by causing those car crashes. I think he's going to land one of those switch stance combinations, drop Strickland, jump on him, and finish him off. I'm going to go with I think it's going to be earlier this time. I'm going to go with a second round knockout for Dricus Du Plessis over Sean Strickland. I think he's going to land one of those switch stance combinations, catch Strickland leaning away and drop him, jump on him, and finish him off. Give me the champion to find a knockout here over Strickland. It wouldn't surprise me if it goes to a decision, but I see a knockout here. Kind of like we called with Imavov and Adesanya, calling the KO. I'm going to go back to the well with the knockout here. I think Du Plessis causes that car crash, lands one of those stance-changing combos, cracks the chin of Strickland, jumps on him, and finishes him off. Give me and still knocks Dricus Du Plessis to remain the UFC middleweight champion via second-round knockout over Sean Strickland in the main event of UFC 312. All right, that's going to be it for my preview, predictions, and breakdown for UFC 312. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, lock a Darce choke on the notification bell, and leave me your comments, leave me your best bets, leave me your thoughts and tells and reads on these fights in the description down below. I'm your host, Double M, and I'm out.